Hi, Steve Sosnick here with today's Interactive Brokers Midday Market Update for Tuesday, November 9th, 2021. It's a beautiful day here in Connecticut. That's why I'm kind of doing this from my porch in November because I can. The main thing I want to talk about today is there's this strange color all over my screen. It's one that I haven't seen in a long time. It seems to be red. Normally almost everything on my screen is green. I really don't seem to get it. Obviously, I'm being facetious. But when you haven't really had a meaningful down day in almost 2 weeks, well, this is the kind of silly response that I can give. The reason for it is it's not even clear that there's necessarily a reason. If we were trading off some of the reasons why we should be down, I would actually argue that we could be lower. I think to me the most important news was that President Biden brought in Lael Brainard to discuss the potential for her to be the next Fed chair. That was reported I saw it on Bloomberg News. I'm not sure who had the scoop. I'll credit them. But that to me is very interesting because I think markets are very comfortable with the idea of Fed Chair Powell. He's certainly led markets over an enormous period of prosperity, responding really well when things were looking grim during the COVID crisis. And he's certainly, by all measures, been a very market-friendly Federal Reserve chair. So as a result, of course, markets should like him and be somewhat nervous at the prospect of changing. There's a couple of things also in there. If she gets the top job, Ms. Brainard, that is, Chairman Powell would presumably step down because it would kind of be weird to go from chairman to just member of the Board of Governors. So that would be yet another spot for President Biden to fill. That's a lot of vacancies in a very, very short period of time in a very, very strategically important organization. That should make markets a bit nervous. That should raise the temperature of the market somewhat. But, if this is the most fear that we can muster off of something like that, down about 0.5% on the major indices as I tape this, well, that tells you it's a pretty sanguine market. You don't necessarily need a reason. Markets don't go up every single day, even if there's a tremendous consensus that they will. And I will argue right now that there's about as strong of a consensus as I could remember in recent times that we will continue to melt up. I mean, how many times have we heard that? I wish I had $1 for every time someone mentioned the word melt up in a media report. But I think that's what we've seen, and it's not necessarily the wrong description. We've actually had very few really big days where we've rocketed higher. Not a lot of days, let's say, where S&P 500 was up more than 0.5% at a time. But it's that relentlessness that I think had people feeling very that the markets were somewhat invulnerable. And when that happens, that's when you tend to get little bits of dips. The other thing on the horizon today was the PPI numbers, which came in for the most part as expected, but those numbers are eye-poppingly huge. I mean, a 6.8% rise in year-over-year PPI is big. It's enormous. Talk about inflation. Yes, the economy is going great guns, but inflation is more than outpacing the economic gains that we've seen. There's two schools of thought on this. Obviously, I guess if the number was expected, then the number was expected, and the market should have just dealt with it. Which is, I think, why we're not seeing any real. There wasn't really any big movement after the number. CPI is coming. We'll see how the markets react to that. That's another potential source of nervousness. But as of now, I think we continue to see a little bit of back and fill. I wouldn't be too worried about it. If we really want to get into it, we could talk about how overbought the market is. We could talk about whether the rally is sustained by internal metrics. Right now, it's sort of an era of good feelings, I'm going to call it. Another interesting thing I read today is that apparently the reverse repo discussion has taken root on Reddit. I haven't really delved into it in too much way. I was just sort of surprised to see the story, and I did look into it a little bit. And as with many things on Reddit, markets are sort of coming around to it. I think in many ways the Redditors try to find a narrative that fits their school of thought rather than, truly thinking about it in the way that it should be thought of. This is something we've talked about at length here, but I think it's important to reiterate. Each day we're seeing about $1.3 to $1.5 trillion in reverse repo at the New York Fed. Reverse repo is a way for the Federal Reserve to drain excess liquidity from the market. If the Fed is pumping in $120 billion a month of liquidity, soon to be 105, soon to be 105, 90, et cetera, as they taper $15 billion a month. But using the past run rate of $120 billion a month, that gives you $1.44 trillion over the course of a year, which is about the midpoint of the amount of reverse repo that we're seeing. So yes, the Fed has to recognize that they're pushing on a string, and I think they do understand that, and I think it's the only thing that prevents them from tapering faster is their fear of disrupting markets. And again, which is, I think, what's contributed to sort of this good feeling among the markets, because it's yet another reminder that the Fed, if you want to call it their dual mandate is full employment and modest inflation, I certainly think that the Powell Fed has a tripartite mandate of let's keep markets happy, or let's at least not annoy markets too much. And so I think that's what we see. Do I read anything nefarious into it? No. It's the Fed's way of preventing short-term interest rates from going to below zero, going negative. They don't want negative interest rates like we see in Europe. If this were truly a free market in short-term currency, we would see that, because that $1.5 trillion that we see showing up at the Fed every day looking for 5 basis points would have to turn to each other to then finance it, presumably with no place to go, and that would pretty much mean that you'd see negative interest rates. Do I think this is nefarious? No. Do I think it's a potential policy misstep by the Fed? Yes. But I think it's actually a way for the Fed to keep markets happy, to keep normalized markets, and I expect to see this dissipate as the relentlessness of the Fed accommodation diminishes. Let's see where it goes. So that's my take. It's something I think you've heard from me for a while, about sort of the absurdity of the Fed continuing to pump in liquidity on one end while at the same time draining it on the other. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I don't want to. I want you to keep that narrative in mind. If you start to see some kooky commentary coming here and there. Anyway, have a very good one, everybody. I think I'd like to think that all of our portfolios can withstand this minor drawdown that we're seeing today, and we will resume again tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.